The night was darker than Diane remembered nights could be. The cabin's windows were open, and the river's voice rushed through them. It wasn't peaceful, it was restless, endless, like something alive. She sat by the window, arms wrapped around her knees, unable to breathe. The water kept speaking, but she didn't know what it wanted to say. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, of something raw and ancient. Every sound, the frogs, the crickets, the current, felt too loud. It was as if the whole world was moving, except for her. Her chest ached from the silence that lived inside her bones. Outside, the river moved on. Unaware of her frozen grief, she had driven all day from St. Louis, leaving behind the cemetery. The boxers in the car were still unopened, her son's things untouched. She couldn't face them. Not yet, maybe not ever. Here, in this lonely stretch of Missouri, she had hoped for quiet. Instead, the river roared like a memory that refused to die. Her hands trembled as she lit a candle on the table. The flame flickered, thin and uncertain, like her will to stay alive. The wax dripped slowly, marking time she didn't want to count. She closed her eyes, but the water's rhythm pulsed behind her lids. Every wave sounded like his name, over and over again. When she finally rose, the floorboards creaked like whispers. She walked toward the small dock, barefoot, drawn to the sound. The moonlight spilled across the current, silver and cold. For a second, she thought she saw someone on the opposite bank, but when she blinked, there was only mist and moving water. That the air turned colder, wrapping around her shoulders like memory. She whispered her son's name, and the river answered with silence. Something in her cracked, not loud, just a soft breaking inside. The grief was too heavy to carry, yet too sacred to drop. She sank to her knees, and the candle's light died behind her. Morning came gray and tired. The world washed clean but hollow. Diane didn't know if she had slept or just stopped crying. The river still moved, steady and certain, like it always had, and she wondered, through swollen eyes, how it could keep going, how anything could, after a loss like hers. The cabin smelled of dust and cedar, of years left untouched. Diane opened each drawer slowly, afraid of finding ghosts inside. The floor moaned beneath her feet like something alive and lonely. She ran her fingers along the walls, tracing cracks like old scars. Everything here carried the memory of someone else's sorrow. In the back room, she found a wooden box covered in cobwebs. Inside were letters, faded ink, brittle paper, names she didn't know. The first one began, "To my dearest, if you're still listening." Her breath caught. The handwriting trembled with heartbreak. It felt as if the cabin itself had tried to speak through them. She sat by the window again, reading until her hands shook. Each letter spoke of loss, of waiting, of hope that never came. The river outside murmured the same rhythm as the words. It was uncanny, as if the water remembered them too. She pressed the last letter to her chest and closed her eyes. A bird hit the glass suddenly, breaking the silence. Feathers scattered, heartbeats quickened, then stillness again. Diane opened the window and watched the tiny creature breathe. She cupped it gently, waiting for life to return to its wings. When it finally flew, something small inside her lifted too. She walked outside, following the bird toward the shore. The water was higher than yesterday, restless and cold. She crouched near the edge, listening to the unending rush. Every drop sounded like time moving without mercy. She whispered, "I'm still here," though no one was listening. That night, she couldn't bring herself to light the candle. The darkness felt truer than the glow of any flame. She lay in bed, hearing the river breathe through the window. The letters rested on her nightstand like fragile prayers. Outside, the wind carried whispers only she could hear. When dawn came, she made tea but couldn't taste it. Her eyes fell again on the letters, old, aching, real. Whoever wrote them had known her pain, she was sure. The thought both comforted and terrified her. Maybe some griefs never leave, they just change names. The first light of morning stretched thin across the water. Mist rose like smoke, wrapping the river in pale silence. Diane stepped outside, mug in hand, breath clouding the air. That's when she saw him, a man on the opposite bank. He stood still, fishing line steady, eyes somewhere far away. For a moment, she thought he might be a ghost. There was something too quiet about the way he moved. He looked up, noticing her, and lifted a hand in greeting. Diane hesitated, then turned away before she could wave back. She wasn't ready to share her silence with anyone yet. The rest of the day passed in uneasy stillness. She read, wrote, rearranged things that didn't need moving, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the riverbank. Who was he? Why here? of all places. The question lingered like the scent of rain before a storm. That evening, she sat by the dock again, watching for him. He was gone, only the empty line of trees across the current. The sound of the river filled the absence between them. She imagined his life, a fisherman, maybe, or a hermit, someone who also came here to forget what couldn't be fixed. As the light faded, she found herself speaking to the water. Her voice sounded strange, unused, almost foreign. "I don't even know your name," she whispered to the night. The words sank into the current, carried away unseen. Still, the act of saying them made her feel less alone. A frog croaked from the reeds, startling her into laughter. The sound felt awkward, like stretching a muscle long unused. She hadn't laughed since the accident, maybe not truly laughed. The sound startled her, then soothed her, all at once. She stayed there until the stars blurred into the water. Before going to bed, she looked once more out the window. The opposite bank glowed faintly in the moonlight. No sign of him, only his absence, shaped like hope. She smiled without knowing why. The river whispered something back she couldn't yet hear. Morning brought a fog so thick it swallowed the trees. Diane woke with a weight in her chest, but also a pull. She sat at the table with a blank sheet of paper before her. For minutes, hours maybe, she just stared at it. Then she began to write slowly, carefully, like breathing again. "Dear Michael," she wrote, her hand trembling. The name alone made her throat close. She told him about the cabin, the sound of the river, the silence, about how she couldn't forget his laughter in the car that day. Each word hurt, but in a way that made her feel alive again. When she finished, the paper was wet with tears. She folded it gently, slid it into an envelope without address. There was nowhere to send it, no one left to receive it. But something in her shifted, quietly, like a window opening. The air in the cabin felt lighter, almost merciful. She placed the letter in a box beside the old ones. It looked right there, among other broken hearts. The river outside murmured as if approving the act. For the first time, Diane didn't flinch at its voice. It didn't sound cruel anymore, it sounded honest. Later that day, she walked along the bank barefoot. The mud was cold, the air damp with the promise of rain. Each step grounded her, pulling her closer to the earth. She looked up and across the water. The man was there again. This time, she didn't look away. He raised his hand once more, a slow, patient gesture. She nodded, just barely, before turning back to the cabin. Her pulse beat in her ears like footsteps on a bridge. That night, she slept for the first time without dreams. The river sang softly, and she didn't resist it. By morning, she found herself smiling at nothing. It felt strange, guilty, but good. The letter still sat in its box, quietly waiting. Outside, sunlight broke through the fog like forgiveness, and Diane whispered, "I think I'm still here." The storm came without warning, thunder, sharp and sudden. Diane ran to the porch as wind tore through the trees. The rain hit the roof like 1,000 rushing feet. Then she saw it, the small boat by the dock breaking free. Her heart jumped as it drifted toward the current. Without thinking, she ran barefoot, soaked wild with urgency. The cold rain bit her skin, but she didn't stop. She reached the dock, grasping at the rope already slipping away. The boat spun in the current, inches from escape. She lunged forward, catching it by sheer desperation. For a moment, she hung halfway off the dock, gripping the rope. The water below looked endless, dark, almost inviting. Her muscles burned, breath ragged against the wind. She screamed, not from fear, but from something deeper. A voice long buried rose inside her and refused to die. When she pulled the boat back, she fell to her knees, shaking. Her palms were bleeding, but she was laughing. It was absurd, impossible, beautiful. She was alive. The rain washed her face clean of both blood and tears. Somewhere, she imagined Michael laughing with her. She tied the rope tighter this time, double knotted, certain. Then she sat on the dock, drenched and trembling. The river still roared, but it no longer sounded cruel. It sounded like breath, like heartbeats, like time. It sounded like something that wanted her to live. When the storm passed, the world smelled of renewal. Leaves dripped, the air shimmered with quiet relief. She looked across the river, and there he was again. The man lifted his hand in a silent salute, and Diane, without hesitation, lifted hers back. That night, she built a fire and warmed her hands. The crackle of wood felt like a promise of life. Outside, the river kept whispering, tireless and true. She didn't know what waited ahead, but she wanted to find out. The sound of the river no longer haunted, it healed. The morning after the storm was still and tender. Mist clung to the trees, and the air smelled of earth and ash. Diane dressed carefully, as if the act itself meant something. She needed to leave the cabin to touch the world again. The village, she'd heard, was only a few miles downriver. She walked along the dirt road, boots sinking in damp soil. Old barns leaned against the sky, paint peeling like memory. When she reached the small store, a bell chimed overhead. The warmth of voices startled her after so much silence. People smiled, curious, kind, not yet familiar. New around here? The cashier asked, eyes gentle but sharp. Diane nodded, keeping her answers small and vague. She didn't mention the accident or the reason she came. Grief, she had learned, makes people pity you too much. She just said, needed a quiet place, and left it at that. As she browsed the shelves, she overheard soft whispers. Someone mentioned the widower across the river. Her pulse caught at the sound. Could it be him? The thought warmed her chest in a way she didn't expect. She left with groceries and questions she couldn't name. Outside, the sky brightened, wind teasing the branches. Children ran past, laughter echoing like bells in her memory. It hurt, but also healed, a contradiction she couldn't explain. She sat by the riverbank near the village and watched the water. The current moved steady, like time refusing to stop for anyone. When she returned to the cabin, the air smelled like rain again. The river was calmer, the world newly washed and alive. She unpacked her things slowly, letting silence settle kindly. For the first time, she hummed a song under her breath. The sound was small, but it was hers. That night, she dreamed of two rivers meeting as one. In the dream, the water was clear, endless, forgiving. When she woke, tears clung to her lashes, not of pain, but release. She stood by the window, whispering into the dawn, maybe I'm not the only one who came here to begin again. Diane discovered the bridge on a quiet afternoon. It was half hidden behind wild vines and rusted rails. Old wood stretched across the water like a forgotten promise. The boards creaked under her feet as she stepped forward. Below, the current whispered secrets to anyone brave enough to listen. Halfway across, her chest tightened with fear. The river looked deeper from here, darker, infinite. The wind tugged at her coat, testing her courage. She stared at the far side, where trees swayed in rhythm. That was his side, the man across the river. She froze, breath shallow, heart loud in her ears. Every step forward felt like betrayal of the past. What if she crossed and found nothing waiting? What if the bridge led nowhere at all? Her hands shook. The boards moaned beneath her weight. She took one more step, then stopped completely. The air around her smelled of moss and water. A bird called from the distance, sharp and lonely. Diane turned back, retreating to the safety of her bank. She wasn't ready, not yet, but she would be someday. Back at the cabin, she made tea to calm her hands. Steam rose gently, curling in the fading light. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Bridges are made for crossing." The words trembled, but they were true. Hope, she realized, was its own kind of construction. Outside, twilight painted the water in shades of silver. She could almost see him through the mist again. He didn't wave this time, just watched quietly. Diane placed her palm on her heart and nodded once. The river hummed softly, carrying her unspoken vow. That night, she dreamed of the bridge glowing under moonlight. In her dream, she walked all the way across, without fear. When she woke, her hands still tingled with courage. She smiled to herself, whispering, "Not yet, but soon." The sound of the river answered, patient and endless. It began with a sudden impulse, wild, unplanned. Diane took one of her letters to Michael, sealed in blue paper. She walked to the dock as the sky turned pink and gold. The river shimmered like a mirror between two hearts. She whispered, "Take it wherever it needs to go, and let it drift." The envelope floated slowly, caught by gentle current. It spun once, twice, then disappeared around the bend. She watched until it was gone, her chest both heavy and free. It felt like letting go of something sacred yet necessary. The river had taken her sorrow and promised to carry it. Days passed. The weather softened, the air grew kind. Diane began writing again, smaller letters. This time, she talked about sunlight, about the way the birds returned. Grief still lived in her, but it was no longer king. Then, one morning, something unexpected appeared by the dock. A bottle, glass, gold glinting in the light. Inside, a folded note, the paper damp but readable. Her heart raced as she pulled it free with trembling hands. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words clear. "I heard you. I'm listening to." She stood frozen, the message shaking in her grasp. Was it a coincidence, or something more? Her eyes searched the opposite shore for movement. There, the faint silhouette of a man by the trees. He lifted his hand in quiet acknowledgement. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't look away. The connection was fragile, mysterious, yet real. Someone else had answered her pain without pity, without words. For the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. The river had become a messenger between broken souls. That night, she wrote again, this time with hope. She sealed the page in a new bottle, smiling as she worked. When she released it, the current caught it like an old friend. The moon glowed above, full and forgiving. She whispered, maybe we both needed to be found. The letters became a rhythm, her days marked by waiting. Each dawn, she checked the water for another reply. And sometimes, impossibly, there it was, a new message. Short notes at first, then longer ones, full of quiet truth. It felt like speaking without the fear of being seen. He signed one finally, Ethan, just that, a name, steady and simple. She repeated it aloud, tasting the sound. It felt grounding, human, alive. For the first time in years, a name didn't hurt to say. His words painted pictures of a life across the shore. He was 52, a fisherman, a man who'd lost too much. His wife, gone 2 years now, the river took her. He wrote, the water gives and it takes, doesn't it? Diane's tears blurred the ink before she could finish reading. They wrote of small things, the smell of rain, the color of dawn, of coffee cooling too fast, of the way loneliness hums. Every exchange wove a thread stronger than silence. Ethan's voice became a place she visited to breathe. Her heart, once quiet, began to whisper again. One evening, she saw him standing closer than before. No fishing line this time, no distance in his eyes. He waved gently, and she raised her hand in return. It was a small thing, but her pulse raced like thunder. Connection, she realized, is the bravest form of faith. Back inside, she found herself humming as she cooked. Her reflection in the window looked softer, almost new. She whispered his name once more, just to feel it echo. Outside, the river shimmered like a secret kept safe. The sound it made was no longer mourning, but music. Before bed, she wrote one more letter. Thank you. She didn't seal it in a bottle, not yet. Some words, she decided, needed to stay close for a while. The river flowed steady, whispering through the open window, and Diane fell asleep to the sound of her own heartbeat. Morning arrived silver and cool, clouds drifting slow. The river seemed softer somehow, like it was listening. Diane felt lighter, though she couldn't explain why. She brewed coffee and walked to the dock, mug in hand. Across the water, Ethan was already waiting. He raised a hand in greeting, then pointed to the sky. A flock of geese moved north in perfect formation. She smiled, heart swelling at the simple beauty of it. Then he cupped his hands and called out across the river. His voice carried faintly. There's something you should know. Later that day, another bottle arrived, larger this time. The message inside was long, the handwriting careful. Diane read it once, then again, heart thudding faster. Ethan wrote about his son, how he'd drowned in this river, right here, in this same stretch of water, years ago. Her breath caught. The world tilted slightly beneath her. 2 lives broken by the same current, the same grief. It couldn't be coincidence. It was something deeper. She pressed the letter to her heart and whispered, I'm sorry. But somehow, she didn't feel alone in her sorrow anymore. That evening, she walked to the bridge and stopped halfway. The air shimmered with sunset, gold bleeding into blue. She could see him on the far side, waiting quietly. Their eyes met across the river's soft roar. No words, just understanding, and the start of something new. She stayed until night fell, moonlight rippling on the water. The river, once cruel, now felt like a living pulse between them. It had carried pain, yes, but also messages, mercy, meaning. She whispered, you've taken enough from us. Now give something back. The wind shifted, and the current glowed pale with light. When she returned to the cabin, she didn't close the curtains. She wanted to see the water, to feel its motion through the dark. Ethan's last words echoed in her mind. The river connects us. She smiled, eyes shining with quiet courage, and for the first time, she didn't fear the sound anymore. The bridge waited, still wounded from the last storm. Boards cracked under her boots as Diane stepped forward. The air was thick with the scent of river and rain. Each step echoed, swallowed by the rush below. Across the water, Ethan stood, small, steady, waiting. Her hands trembled, but her heart was calm. She had written no letter this time, carried no message, only herself. All the pain, all the hope, all the living. Halfway across, the wind caught her coat, almost playful. She smiled, whispering, "Not this time, Fia, not this time." When she reached him, he didn't speak. He only looked at her, a long, quiet look that said everything. Two people, shaped by loss, breathing the same air again. For a moment, the world held still, soft and sacred. The river below roared like applause. They walked together along his side of the bank. The trees here were greener, the soil darker and warm. He showed her where he fished, where he wrote his notes. Diane listened, memorizing the way he spoke his truth. Each word was a piece of something she'd thought lost. Later, they sat on a fallen log and shared coffee. It was bitter and perfect, like the day itself. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It breathed. He said softly, "We survived the same water." She nodded, eyes full but heart light. As twilight fell, they stood together on the bridge again. Ethan reached out, his fingers brushing hers. It was simple, human, but it felt like resurrection. When she crossed back home, she didn't feel the gap anymore. The river was no longer between them, it was part of them. That night, she wrote her son a final letter draft. Not to send, not yet, just words for herself. "I met someone who understands the river." Her handwriting didn't shake this time. Outside, the water sang a softer song. Days turned golden, gentle, alive with small things. Diane found herself humming as she cooked breakfast. Ethan visited often, bringing fish and stories. They laughed about clumsy boats, stubborn winds, burnt toast. Each laugh loosened something long locked inside. It felt strange, dangerous even, to feel light again. Guilt shadowed her joy like a ghost behind sunlight. Could she still laugh when her son could not? The thought burned deep, sharp, unforgiving. Ethan noticed the silence and waited without questions. They spent afternoons by the river, watching light ripple. Diane told him about Michael, the accident, the ache. He listened, eyes heavy with shared knowing. Then he said quietly, "Love doesn't end, it changes shape." Those words stayed with her long after dusk. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, she laughed, really laughed, loud, honest, alive. It startled her, echoed against the trees. Then tears followed, unstoppable and pure. Ethan simply held her, while the river glowed gold. In the days that followed, her steps grew lighter. She painted the cabin door blue, Michael's favorite color. Neighbors began to wave when she came to town. Life, she realized, had not abandoned her. It had simply waited for her to say yes again. At night, she dreamed not of loss, but of rivers merging. Michael smiling from the current, peaceful, free. She woke with tears, but they didn't sting. They felt like blessings instead of pain. The river outside hummed softly, a lullaby for the living. When she saw Ethan the next morning, she smiled first. He noticed, smiled back, and said, "You're different today." "I think," she answered. "The river's finally teaching me to breathe." They walked together in silence, side by side, two souls still healing, but no longer broken. The rain began with a whisper, then grew relentless. Clouds bruised the sky, the air thick with warning. Diane watched from the window, uneasy, remembering storms past. The river rose, inch by inch, restless, unstoppable. Ethan hadn't come that day. The bridge looked too fragile. By nightfall, thunder cracked like the earth's own grief. She lit candles, heart pounding with memory and fear. The water outside raged, clawing at the banks. The sound was deafening, not healing, not gentle. It sounded like the day she lost everything. She ran to the bridge with a lantern in hand. Rain lashed her face, wind tore at her coat. The wooden boards groaned, ready to give way. "Ethan," she screamed across the dark water. No answer, just the roar of a furious river. For hours she waited, shouting his name through the storm. Lightning flashed, revealing chaos and loss. Then, a shape moving in the distance, staggering forward. It was him, soaked, fighting the current, refusing to stop. She cried his name again, voice raw and breaking. The bridge finally cracked, splintered, then collapsed. The sound echoed like a scream swallowed by thunder. Ethan barely made it to shore, collapsing in the mud. Diane reached him, hands shaking, tears mixing with rain. They held each other as the river tore the bridge apart. When the storm passed, dawn crept slow and gray. The world was broken, yet somehow still standing. Ethan slept against her shoulder, alive but exhausted. Diane whispered, "You came back." He murmured, "So did you." She looked at the river, wild but retreating, its fury spent, its surface trembling with light. It had tested them, taken again, but not everything. Diane closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of thanks. For once, loss had not won. The village woke to ruin and resilience. Bridges gone, trees uprooted, roofs torn apart. Still, people gathered, helping, mending, rebuilding. Diane joined them, sleeves rolled, heart steady. Her hands, once afraid, now worked with purpose. Ethan moved slowly but wouldn't rest. Together, they carried wood, hammered nails, shared silence. Every gesture felt sacred. Survival turned into creation. Neighbors brought coffee, bread, laughter amid the wreckage. The world, bruised, still found a way to sing. When the sun broke through, it felt like grace. Children splashed in puddles, unafraid of the water. Someone began to play a harmonica softly. The melody drifted through the air like forgiveness. Diane smiled until her cheeks ached. Ethan found her by the riverside at dusk. He handed her a small carved figure, a bridge of wood. "For when we build the real one," he said gently. Her throat tightened as she took it in her hands. It was simple, but it meant everything. They sat together as light faded into silver. The river glimmered, calmer now, almost kind. She rested her head on his shoulder, eyes closed. For once, the silence between them needed no words. The river spoke enough for both. Later, back at the cabin, Diane lit a candle. Its flame danced in the reflection of the windowpane. She whispered to the darkness, "I'm proud of us." Outside, the stars blinked through the clearing clouds. The world was still here, and so was she. That night, the river was quiet, peaceful, almost shy. It sounded not like sorrow, but completion. The same song, but in a different key. Diane fell asleep, smiling, dreaming of bridges, dreaming of morning. Months passed. The bridge was rebuilt, stronger than before. Its wood gleamed new, but its spirit carried memory. The town gathered to celebrate beneath the open sky. Children ran, laughter echoing like music over water. Diane stood by the railing, heart steady, eyes bright. She had written her final letter that morning. It was short, simple, and filled with peace. "Dear Michael, I'm not letting you go. I'm taking you with me." She folded it, kissed the paper, and sealed it tight. Then, she walked to the river with Ethan by her side. The water shimmered, calm as glass. Together, they released the letter into the current. It drifted slowly, turning once before gliding away. Sunlight caught it, making it shine like a promise. Diane whispered, "You're free now." "So am I," the town cheered, as the ribbon was cut, crossing the bridge. Ethan laughed, his hand finding hers naturally. The air smelled of pine, rain, and something sweet renewal. Diane looked up at the sky and felt her sun everywhere. In the river, in the wind, in the sound of living dot. As evening fell, lanterns floated down the water. One by one, tiny lights danced across the surface. Diane watched hers drift until it vanished into darkness. The sound of the river rose softly, like a lullaby. It no longer hurt, it healed. Ethan turned to her, voice low and certain. "Do you ever miss the silence?" he asked. She smiled, shaking her head gently. The silence was grief. "This is life." And the river whispered, eternal and alive. When the last lantern disappeared beyond the bend, she exhaled. The night was still, yet full of quiet motion. Diane closed her eyes, hand over her heart. The sound of the river filled her one last time. It sounded like love, and it sounded like home.